Welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Houston, Texas is one of the rare, nice, big cities left in this country. A little hot in the summer, but great people, very pretty neighborhoods, and a lot going on. Thanks to the energy sector, biotech, and aerospace, Houston has an enormous and still robust economy. It is hardly some dying mill town in the Northeast or the upper Midwest. Your kids might want to move to Houston someday, maybe after college. It's not Baltimore. But all of a sudden, Houston, Texas is starting to look a little bit more like Baltimore. Crime in Houston has gotten scary. The murder rate there has risen by more than 50% in just the last year. It's bad. Here's a local news report.
A deadly start to the year across Houston. Police investigating at least 41 homicides through 24 days. So far this year, Houston has more murders than New York City, Los Angeles, even Chicago.
It's one of those things where I'm fearful for my family just to go out of the house.
The president of the Houston Police Officers Union frustrated.
If it keeps up this pace, we're going to be well over 500 murders this year.
I'm fearful just for my family to go outside of the house. As you heard, that was the president of the police union in Houston, so he would know. It's amazing this is happening in all places in Houston, and what's so telling about this crime wave is how recently it began. Murders in Houston started to spike in a big way after Joe Biden became president. Why is that exactly? Very simple answer. Joe Biden opened the southern border. Texas shares more than 1,200 miles of border with Mexico. There is a brutal cartel war underway in Mexico right now. It's been going on for a long time. Many of the combatants in that war have now moved north into Texas. They brought drugs with them. They've also brought machine guns. This fall, a felon opened fire on Houston police officers with a fully automatic rifle. Now, you hear a lot about assault weapons, but the truth is authorities don't see fully automatic weapons very often. They are heavily regulated and typically they're owned by collectors. But automatic weapons are very common in war zones, and there is a war in Mexico. So with no border in place, the cartels are bringing their armaments here. Watch this firefight in Houston.
Dion, it's Houston Police. Let's do this thing. Let's do this thing.
That's automatic weapons fire. It sounds like Syria or Mexico, but it's an apartment complex in Houston, Texas. We could go on. If you know anybody who lives in Houston, call and ask, how's your city changed recently? And they'll tell you. Open Borders did this. Houston didn't do it to itself. This was done to Houston, and not just to Houston, to so many places across this country, where millions of illegal aliens have flooded in during Joe Biden's presidency. On Monday, for example, more than 100 illegal Haitian migrants landed in the Florida Keys in a single boat. You're watching aerial footage from Summerlin Key, Florida. Pictures like this are no longer uncommon in the state of Florida. The world is coming to America's shores. Why? Because they're fully aware that the Biden administration is rewarding foreign nationals for violating our federal immigration law. It is an invasion. Huge numbers of Americans are dying as a result of that invasion. 100,000 dead last year of drug ODs. Most were killed by fentanyl that is trucked in from Mexico across open borders. Long term, there are massive labor market disruptions. There is evaporating social cohesion, and so on. The costs of this have been beyond calculating. And this is exactly why no sane country opens its borders ever, anywhere. What Joe Biden is doing right now has never been done. And it's about to get much worse. We're not guessing. Currently, a Trump-era regulation called Title 42 allows the Border Patrol to turn illegal migrants back to Mexico on the grounds that there's a pandemic in progress. Probably shouldn't let millions of people infected with COVID move here without permission. Seems sensible. But according to Democrats, this rule is racist because it might slow the human wave of migration. So for months, they've been demanding that the Biden administration suspend this rule. Watch them whine.
I urge President Biden and Secretary Mayorkas to immediately put a stop to these expulsions and to end this Title 42 policy at our southern border. That we cannot continue these hateful and xenophobic Trump policies.
In addition, a relic, Title 42, exists. It is a relic of the Trump administration. It was created to be mean-spirited. Title 43, I ask for a suspension of it.
I urge the Biden administration and my colleagues to remember the refugees who are waiting at our border, kept out by the cruel and unnecessary Title 42 policy.
Look, Title 42 is being used in a way that I think is indiscriminate and that violates the basic essence of our law. But this process that the Biden administration has continued from the Trump administration, in my mind, is inexcusable.
So your kid has to wear a mask in school, but illegal aliens get to come here with no restrictions at all, despite the fact they may be infected with COVID, because otherwise you're a racist. That's the case they were making, and so finally, inevitably, the Biden administration has caved. Turns out even trying to maintain basic public health standards is unacceptable if it gets in the way of increasing mass immigration. Title 42 is being nullified. A similar rule, you should know, will still apply to you. American citizens are not exempt. To this day, you as a citizen are not allowed to return to the United States without permission from the CDC. Rochelle Walensky will sign off on that. So coming back to the country you were born in is no longer your birthright, but illegal aliens now face no barriers at all. And of course, they know it. Everyone knows it. It's not their fault. It's our president's fault. According to Axios, quote, U.S. intelligence officials are privately bracing for a massive influx of more than 170,000 migrants at the Mexico border now that Title 42 is ending. So the wave grows. The total transformation of this country accelerates. So we've been very passive in the face of this. People make grumpy noises about it. No one's done anything. How should we respond? Well, the same way we respond to any other invasion, with the U.S. military. That's why countries have militaries, to stop invasions. And this would not be a hard invasion to stop. Our military could seal the border with Mexico in days. That would save American lives, it would restore order, and it would end the invasion. Does that sound crazy? Like a misuse of the U.S. military? Well, keep in mind that Nancy Pelosi called in the U.S. military to protect her from Trump voters at the U.S. Capitol. She treated our soldiers like her personal security detail. And then, of course, at this very moment, we are sending thousands of American troops and billions in American military hardware to Eastern Europe to help the Ukrainians restore their borders. So the obvious question is, why not here? Why not take America's safety, your family's safety, as seriously as Nancy Pelosi takes her own safety? That seems like a fair question. Probably not Russian disinformation, probably an honest question. We spoke to Congresswoman Maria Salazar of Miami last night, and we asked that question of her. She refused to answer. Watch how she refused. I just can't help notice the contrast between your desire to send MiGs to Ukraine to preserve its borders, but not here. Should we send the U.S. military to the Mexican border, since you have admitted that tens of millions of people have come here illegally, that our borders are porous, they're not defended, they are open? Should we send the U.S. military to the Mexican border?
That is what I have created a whole plan so we can really seal the border. Because you know what? My community, the one that I represent, let me finish.
Let me finish. America, the one that I represent. I'm asking a question about borders. All of us are appalled by the violation of Ukraine's borders. You don't seem as appalled by the violation of our borders by tens of millions of people. So let me ask you for the third time.
Sure, I do.
Military
That's a misrepresentation.
Equipment. Okay, then would you support the U.S. military securing the United States border tonight, or on the same timetable as sending MiGs to Ukraine? How about that?
That's hypothetical again.
Oh, it's hypothetical. I've got a plan. Right. How many plans have you heard about from Republicans for, say, the past 25 years? Many, many, many. To restate, this is a highly dangerous situation that the Biden administration has placed our country in. Mexico, whatever its merits, is in the middle of a war. Not a new war, a war that has raged on for more than a decade, a war that has likely killed more than 100,000 people so far. You're seeing footage on your screen right now of trucks burning in the town of Nuevo Laredo. That's just feet from the U.S. border in the state of Texas. What you're looking at is the aftermath of a 3-hour gun battle between cartels and government forces. You'll notice the situation there is so chaotic that the trucks just burn in the middle of the road. No one comes to put out the fires, to restore order, to arrest anyone. So that's not a law enforcement action. That's a war. That's what wars are like. A few years ago, the Sinaloa cartel used heavy machine guns and armored vehicles to win a pitched battle against the Mexican military. That's a war. a civil war feet from our border. And that's the country Joe Biden opened our border to. It's insanity. And yet somehow our Congress cannot be bothered to notice this. Any of it. Even as millions stream across. Murder victims in Houston apparently don't have influential social media accounts, so Kevin McCarthy doesn't know that they exist. And that's a shame, because when he sees it on TikTok, he acts. Here's McCarthy demanding we send military equipment across the world to stop the invasion of another country. Watch.
When you think about what President Biden should do, I think there's a bipartisan movement right here. Provide them the MiGs. Provide them the planes where they can create a no-fly zone. Provide them the armament that they need to continue to fight a war that they did not create.
So McCarthy says of the Ukrainians, it's a war they didn't create. And that is certainly true. The Ukrainians did not create that war. The Ukrainians did not invade their own country. But we didn't either. We didn't invade our own country. Very few Americans wanted to open our border to a narco state in the middle of a drug war. Joe Biden did that to us. And no one cares. So maybe we need our own Zelensky to get the world's attention and stop the invasion of America. Who will that be? J.D. Vance is running for Senate in the state of Ohio. He joins us tonight. J.D., thanks so much for coming on. Without even weighing into the question of how and to what degree we ought to be supporting Ukraine in its efforts to get the Russians out of their country, why is no one trying to get the invasion of the United States to stop? And why is using the U.S. military in which you served a crazy idea?
Well, Tucker, because our politicians don't care about their citizens. I mean, think about this. Every time that Joe Biden undoes one of Trump's immigration policies, it leads to a massive spike in fentanyl coming across our country. That kills our citizens. But there are also cascading effects, Tucker. Think about the grandparents who are living on a fixed income, who are raising a generation of children who are orphaned by the fentanyl problem. And on top of that, Joe Biden's inflation policies have meant that those grandparents have struggled to even put food on the table of the children they're now taking care of. Now, Joe Biden, instead of providing relief for this problem, has basically decided to shut down America's pipelines, drive our energy costs through the roof, and this guy has the audacity to lecture us sacrificing for the Ukrainians. Listen, Joe Biden, we don't need a lecture about sacrifice. Americans have sacrificed plenty in the last couple of years. What we need you to do is stop being a terrible president and take care of your own country.
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, I don't have any problem with showing concern for other people, other nations. But if you treated your kids this way, if you were deeply concerned about the fate of your neighbor's kids but ignored your own, your kids would wind up in rehab. Not pointing fingers at Joe Biden here, but you know, maybe we should learn. They don't care. I mean, because if they cared, they'd do something, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, one of the takeaways of this, and for so long, Tucker, I thought that this was just bad policy, that these people were idiots or just didn't know what they were doing. You look at the glee, you look at the excitement, the fact that Chuck Schumer is actually inviting Joe Biden to undo a Trump-era policy that he knows will cause this border crisis to get even worse. And you realize this is not bad policy. These people are doing it by design. It's good policy from their very warped perspective because they are accomplishing the invasion of the country that they should love, but of course they don't. And you have to ask yourself who's benefiting from this and who's getting rich from it. And there's two big answers. First of all, Chamber of Commerce style Republicans and Democrats who love the cheap labor, who love the fact that these immigrants are displacing America's workers, but also Democrat politicians who have decided that they can't win re-election in 2022 unless they bring in a large number of new voters to replace the voters that are already here. That's what this is about. We have an invasion in this country because very powerful people get richer and more powerful because of it. It's not bad policy, it's evil, and we need to call it that.
I couldn't agree with you more. J.D. Vance, running for Senate in the state of Ohio. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Tucker.